and we're going to take it from here. Right. So thanks, ALECA and Iza and Serge for inviting me to speak on your monthly Thursday Talk series. It wasn't your fault. You know, these kind of things do happen, and these are just evil intentioned people, but we all have good intentions and we'll do what we can today. Okay, so what I want to do is I like to spend the next 45 minutes with you in an interactive manner. And as I go along, please post any question that pops up in the chat box as I proceed with my slides, because I don't want us to forget. And then we'll get done by hopefully 1:50. And last 10 minutes, we discuss whatever that might not have come up, okay? All right, so this is my first slide, and I'm here as council member of Climate Governance Malaysia. I know Eza has explained that I sit on several boards, but primarily my passion is about the climate. And I'm here today as a council member of Climate Governance Malaysia. And Climate Governance Malaysia basically is the second chapter after the UK chapter of the World Economic Forum's Climate Governance Initiative. And WEF's CGI is based on 8 principles. Basically to create climate risk-related fluency on boards, which are climate accountability, command of the subject, board structure, assessment of material risk, integrating climate issues into strategy, how you want to incentivize your management, and then of course reporting, disclosure, and subsequently exchange. Exchange is what we are doing now. Yeah, basically we're sharing, because this is a ongoing subject. There is no one textbook on this. There's no one school of thought on this, so it's very dynamic. So if you want to know more about these principles, you can go to the WEF. Just Google WEF Climate Governance Initiative, and then you can download the document outlining the principle. So CG Malaysia is a network of non-executive directors, and we hope to be a resource center for board directors on matters surrounding climate. And of course, it's interrelated factor, which is natural capital. Yeah, natural capital, things like water, air quality, biodiversity, soil and land. Sometimes we talk about it as if it's separate from the climate, but actually it's all interrelated. Because we got to get into the idea that everything is interrelated, it's a systems thinking. And because of that, when we affect one, another will be affected as well. So it's a mindset, but I think eventually we'll all get there. So is there slide 2, please? And so what is sustainability? It started out with the term sustainable development, arising from the Brundtland Commission report 1987 from the United Nations. So it's not new, it's old, this idea, sustainable development. And it comes out of a report called Our Common Future. All these things are available on the net. So just Google Our Common Future, which is also known as the Brundtland report. And the whole idea is, you can see that the definition given was meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So it's based on the concept of equity. Yeah, equity, in this case, intergenerational equity. I think the human DNA is primarily based on equity and justice. Sometimes, things are not evident, not clear, but we can sense when there's injustice or when something is unfair, we just revolt against it. It's a law of nature. It's a law of humans. So because of this, I think this definition of sustainable development based on intergenerational equity is even more important, because when I'm talking about equity between us today and the future generation. Of course, there are those outliers that don't believe in this. As far as they're concerned is, hey, that's not our problem. By the time the problem arises, we're dead. So, no, we don't want that type of thinking. That's just the old way of thinking. We don't want that type of thinking. We want to think whatever we do today, there will be a good outcome later on. Yeah. So don't forget, equity shouldn't be confused with equality. A lot of people also confuse equity with equality. Equity is basically according to each person's needs, which means somebody might get more, somebody might get less, but it is equitable still because it meets that person's needs. Yeah. I didn't understand this concept when I was young. When my siblings and I used to complain to my parents, "Hey, how come not fair? So and so got more than me." And my father would say, "Yeah, but he doesn't need as much as you." So, from a young age, I was raised to think, "Oh, it has to be equal." No, it doesn't have to be equal. It just needs to be equitable. Next slide, Isa. Okay, so guys, please, if you have any questions, just post on the chat. Isa will raise it to me. So after that Brundtland report, the United Nations came about with the Millennium Development Goals in 2000, and that lasted for 15 years. I mean, it was very good, but it ran out after 15 years, and they came up with the Sustainable Development Goals, which everybody has heard of, in 2015. And this will take us through to 2030, another 15 years. And you can of course, everything is on the net now. You can have a look at the 17 SDGs. It's very important. I didn't realize how important it was until I really looked into the sustainability. Asa, next slide. And all these goals are intended to address the human condition worldwide. Okay, so keep the concept of equity in the back of your mind. Okay, because we're talking about developed countries, undeveloped countries, but this is a worldwide human condition. And the goals are no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy, decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation and infrastructure, reduce inequalities, sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, climate action, life below water, life on land, peace, justice, and strong institutions. Yeah. So depending on where you live, what country you are in, what sort of government you have, these different goals will apply to you. But it's not just a country thing or a government thing. I believe that even as individuals, we can decide which of these goals we want to aspire to, or we want to contribute to, or we want to help to, in our own little way. Isa, next slide, please. So, like I said, those goals are talking about society-wide big problems, and it's all systemic. Systemic meaning all of us will experience this risk at one point of time or another. Yeah. So that's why it's a systems problem, and again, the result is each according to his or her needs. And who are the actors? Countries, governments, businesses, individual communities. But which of these move the needle most? So think about it. I think as a group, I would think businesses tend to move the needle most. But before we talk about businesses and companies, let's talk about us, or let's talk about me as an individual. My personal favorite SDG is SDG 12, which is responsible consumption and production, and really it's up to each of you. But the reason why I like SDG 12 is because it is directly within my control. How I consume and how I vote with my wallet on the way people produce things. I feel that I can actually move the needle in this aspect. And I think what helps is the concept of circularity. And the concept of circularity basically is, first of all, to eliminate waste, and whatever it is that we consume, it's something that's capable of being regenerative. So let me explain this in the next slide. Okay, so to expand our understanding, I really like Simon Sinek, and I mentioned this in one of my blogs. This was This is quite an old TED talk given by him, but it's very inspiring because what he's saying is that whatever you do, start with asking yourself why. Why are you doing it? Because why will give you the purpose, and with the purpose, you know the direction. It's like a map, right? Um, I want to go to Penang, but if I don't know that I want to go to Penang, I might wander everywhere. I might go to Johor first. I might go to Pahang first. But if I know I'm going to Penang, I'm going to Penang. I can choose the fast way, the slow way. But yeah, so he's telling you the importance of understanding the purpose. And to me, I apply that as a board director in the corporate context as well, or even in work where I volunteer or where I contribute anywhere. Whenever we meet, I will ask, why are we doing this? Because that will inform how we're going to proceed. I think a few of my friends, and Savita, I see you, Savita, you know I ask you all sorts of questions. So yeah, why is so important? And once you've understood why, I think half the battle is won. Okay, so circularity is about living life in a sustainable way, and how do we as human beings live life in a sustainable way? Okay, so think about a donut. Yeah, a donut. You have the outer circle, and then you have the inner circle. All right. So the outer circle is where your planetary ceilings are. And this is explained by the Stockholm Resilience Center. They did a research, and Johan Rockström, who is one of the researchers with the Stockholm Resilience Center, in his TED talk, also shown here, talks about the 9 planetary boundaries or the environmental ceilings, and that forms the outer part of the donut, which is basically climate change, land use change, biodiversity loss, ozone depletion, atmospheric pollution, chemical pollution, ocean acidification, nitrogen and phosphorus levels, and freshwater use. Yeah, again, all this just Google. So the idea is that human beings should live in a way that should not exceed these ceilings. And then taken further by Kate Raworth, who is a very renowned economist from University of Oxford. She wrote a book called The Donut Economics. And she added that in addition to the 9 planetary boundaries, there are 12 social foundations. So that's the inner part of the donut, which consists of water, food, energy, health, education, income and work, peace and justice, political voice, social equity, gender equality, housing, networks. So I'm going very fast because all this information you can find. But again, there is a very useful YouTube where Kate explains what the donut economics is all about. And what you're sustainable if you're able to live within the 9 planetary boundaries, i.e. the sweet spot. It's sweet spot where the donut is. Yeah. And in order to do this, you adopt the circular economy mindset. And the circular economy mindset is not here, but the Ellen MacArthur Foundation actually goes very deeply into the circular economy mindset. And this is one of the enablers which our government, my CAC, has mentioned for Malaysia to move forwards. Ezra, do we have the link for Ellen MacArthur Foundation?
Yes, I've shared it on the comment box. Yes.
Okay. All right. So all these form the background to where I come from when I talk about living sustainably. All right. Next slide. Okay, so when you talk about companies and businesses, right? To me, companies are businesses that can actually move the needle when you're talking about sustainability. There is a dawning understanding that humans are the prime driver of changes to the Earth systems. This era that we live in is called the Anthropocene era. And what has happened during this era is that human activity has breached several planetary boundaries here, the outer. And because most of this activity is done by businesses and corporations, which at this point in time has contributed to in the wealth and prosperity of mostly Western countries. But a lot of the countries such as China, India, Russia, Brazil, they're also catching up. And how all this activity started was after the World War, from 1950s to 1970s. The concept is of shareholder primacy. Shareholder primacy is where the companies make a lot of money. Sorry. Shareholders, the whole intention is to maximize profits and to give dividends to your shareholders. So, and a lot of the business model that was adopted then was take, make, use, and lose. Take, make, use, and lose basically is they take a lot of the resources of the world and they make things out of it, and then they sell it, people use it, and then you dispose of it. So it's very much a disposable type of society. Then in 1973, the concept of stakeholders came up. This came up also at the World Economic Forum at Davos, which established the idea that businesses should actually serve society as a whole, not just the shareholders. And this gave birth to the idea of stakeholder. In 2001, the United Nations Assembly then said, hey, companies, businesses, you've got to be good corporate citizens. You are now citizens of the world. You're not just some nebulous thing out there making a lot of money for your shareholders. And in 2020, now stakeholder capitalism is mainstreaming. And they actually put this in the Davos Manifesto, which of course, you all can download and find out. So there's a lot of movement in the thinking from shareholder primacy to today's stakeholder capitalism. So the understanding is now, next slide is when you talk about corporate sustainability, you have to talk about it in the context of your stakeholders. Okay. And corporate sustainability is used interchangeably with the term ESG. And basically, it's how does your organization operate profitably in a way that it is a problem solver and not a problem contributor. Okay, so when you talk about corporate sustainability, you're talking about survival, but you're also talking about resilience, i.e. the future. You're talking about being strong, anti-fragile, and without which not, you have to be able to deliver long-term corporate success and value across society. So it's not just value to your shareholders, it's across society. So this is the expectation today. If you're a modern company today and you hope to survive, not just survive, but prosper into the future, you have to understand this. All right, next slide. All right. So, companies, it's a legal entity. It's something that doesn't really exist like you and I. Yeah. But it has a legal entity. But the legal entity has to be run by human beings. And who are the human beings that are made accountable for it? Two sets. One is the board of directors. One is the management. Now, the management are the people that actually run the businesses, that formulate the strategy, that actually implement. But the board are the ones that have oversight over them, that have responsibility for them. At the end, you are the one that you, as a board director, you have to answer for whatever it is that the company does or does not do. So the board is accountable for your strategy, and therefore you have to be futuristic about it. And then also you have to understand your minimum standards of duty, which is, as I said, owed now not just to your shareholder, but to your stakeholders. Next slide, Isa. Yeah. So, I've been thinking about this. Who are my stakeholders? Who are my stakeholders? And what is important to them? And to me, each company, entity, even person, have to ask this question themselves, because I think it differs from entity to entity and organization to organization. But off the top of my head, if I'm thinking of a commercial enterprise, not a not-for-profit, or an NGO, off the top of my head, you would think it'd be your customers, your employees, in addition to your shareholders, of course. But more than that, it's also to your community where you exist in. It's also to your regulators, your suppliers, your value chain. So it's a lot of people. Sometimes you have to think, is your environment, meaning the climate, your natural capital, the water that you extract, are these all your stakeholders? So you have to establish where are the boundaries of your responsibility. So it's not so easy to identify, but I think as a business or as an entity, it has to be ascertained together. Where the boundaries of your responsibilities are, and therefore who your stakeholders are. Next slide, Isa. Okay, so why I talk about business case is basically a company exists to make money. Yeah? We all understand that. Without the money, you can't even begin to talk about being useful to your stakeholders or being useful to your community. So let's talk about the money. Let's talk about the business case. Why is ESG important? Why is sustainability important? It is important because it's market driven. As I mentioned, now your stakeholders demand it. Number two, it does relate to your financial performance, and I'll talk a bit more about that. And number three, your investors and your financiers or your bankers today expect it. So it is no longer a nice to have, it's actually a business imperative, which you can see happening very fast across the world. Even within this last month, so many laws have come up that are requiring disclosures, mandatory disclosures in the EU, in the UK, pertaining to ESG and sustainability. It's not mandatory yet in our part of the world, but you can see from the MCCG and from a lot of editorials or opinions in the newspapers and in the business magazines, you can see that this is already being demanded. Next slide, Esa. Okay, so when we talk about our investors, why do you think that they expect this of you? Okay, one would think that investors would just bother about returns. How much are you going to be able to give me in terms of dividends? How fast can my stock price rise? Yeah, all that is important to the investor. But more than that, investors expect this because investors actually relate your ESG, your sustainability activities to your ability to create value. Why? Now, people like BlackRock, MSCI, they have done research and empirical research that shows that companies that have been very active or very good about ESG and sustainability also happen to perform very well. So there is a correlation, okay? Not causation. Yeah? Causation means one causes the other. Not causation, but correlation. And when there is this correlation, it signals to your market, to your investors, that you are doing well. You can create value. Yeah. In addition to that, and Eza will post the links where you can download this research, and you can read it for yourself, where ESG and sustainability, particularly climate change, actually show that the ability of a company to create value. But more recently, and particularly because of the COVID-19, they can also show that companies who are strong in ESG and sustainability also are resilient. They are coming out of this pandemic and of these difficult times in a way that is strong or stronger. So you also signal, in addition to your ability to create value, you also signal that you can be resilient. So it is a very good thing if, as a company, you are able to show your stakeholders, in addition to your investors, that you are very mindful of your ESGs. Now, always connect ESG to SDG, because remember, the objective is you want to be a problem solver, not a problem contributor. So you decide which of the SDGs is important to you, and then you connect. Okay, so again, different as it is for each company, it is different for each individual. Okay, all right, Esa, next. Okay, now the major issue about trying to start on a ESG or sustainability journey is one of short-termism. Now, this was a term that was shared with me by one of the CEOs of the companies I serve on, Manuel, of MPI. Now, he said that this is where the trap lies, short-termism. Yeah. So let me explain to you what short-termism means. Okay, so companies, especially public listed companies, we as a company, you have to disclose your financials every quarterly. And this is a very much awaited event. Why? Because your investors want to see how well you're doing, and then your stock price will go up, stock price will go down, or how much dividends you're going to give. But what then happens is there is a pressure on CEOs to deliver. So when you start thinking quarter to quarter, it's very difficult for you to plan to spend money or to invest on something that is long-term, such as sustainability. Why? Because it comes up as an expense. When it comes out as an expense in your accounts, then you are showing less profits, something which you think that your investors or your bankers won't like. Okay, so this is what was happening before, but now with the research that I shared with you, I think people are beginning to understand differently that even though in the short term you may be showing some decreases due to perhaps your activities in the ESG space, due to perhaps your investment. But if you can message, if you can disclose in your documents that you are spending it well, then your investors and your stakeholders will be on board with you. Okay, so yes, short-termism is a trap, but the way out of this is messaging. Right? So, Eza, can we go to the next slide? So, let's just say I'm going to illustrate this using the climate change area. So, in the climate change space, the IPCC report in 2018 on global warming showed that there will be clear benefits to the world to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. All right. Again, you can download this report. You can Google, easily available. Why? Why did they report like this? We are already today seeing 1 degree above pre-industrial level. So another 0.5 degrees is, I can imagine, easy enough. But the whole objective of limiting it to 1.5 is so that we don't get to a point in 2050 where it's too late, which means the world will be burning. We can't even turn back even if we wanted to. So this is the time to do it. But over and above that is we have to think what are the ramifications of that. Sea level rises, areas where you cannot live anymore, there's no water, mass migration, not enough food. So basically you will create a lot of societal problems. So back to those SDGs. So if we are able to limit global warming to 1.5, it will go hand in hand with ensuring a more sustainable and equitable society. And the report said that to limit the further warming, what is required is that we need, as a world, global net human cause emissions of carbon must fall by 45% by 2030. Not far away, 9 years from now. It has to go down by 45% compared to 2010 levels. And by 2050, we have to achieve net zero. Anything more than that, we have to remove it. I don't even know whether we have that technology yet. Okay, maybe, hopefully, we will have. So, how much emissions are we doing? As who knows how much emissions are we doing now? Quick guess. All right. Anyone want to guess first? Is there anybody's guessing?
Not in the chat box yet. Gigatons, yes, yeah.
Yeah, gigatons. How many gigatons? A lot of gigatons, yeah. 51 billion tons per annum. Okay, a lot. So where do we have to get to? Zero. So it is a interdisciplinary, across nations effort. And that's why the United Nations COP26 coming up at the end of this year, they are very, very concerned about this, trying to get countries to commit to this, because many countries can't even commit to this yet, yeah, much less companies. So they have a initiative called the Race to Zero. So that's what it's all about, the Race to Zero, and they're encouraging companies. Okay, so all right, countries, you all cannot commit. Let's see, we can get companies to commit. Okay, so you will see a lot of big multinational companies have already committed. Many of them have committed to cutting down by 50% or 45% by 2030, and then down to zero by 2050. So that's what it all means. So, okay, let's talk about us. So let's focus. Okay, choose a target. Okay, in my case, I chose climate change. I want to align to IPCC recommendations. By 2030, I want to reduce my emissions by 45%. Okay, I talk only, yeah. So, but okay, I talk in my room here, in my office. Nobody's listening to me, but I think I just told all of you that I am going to do this. So the objective is, once you commit to it, you make a pledge and you make a public statement, because once it's out there, it's very difficult to turn back. So, for example, join COP25's Race to Zero campaign, for example. Okay, so now we've made this pledge. What do we do next? All right, how many gigs am I emitting? I have no idea how many gigs I'm emitting. Bill Gates said 51 billion tons, but how much of that is me? So we have to have a baseline. We have to measure what we're doing today. So as an individual, we can go online and find some carbon footprint calculator. Plenty there. Yeah, for fun, go out and do it. See what your carbon footprint is. I think I did this once, and I was so guilty. I know I love to travel, and every time I travel, I burn out a whole bunch of carbon, and I felt so guilty. I started paying. I started paying for the credits, but still, it didn't assuage my guilt. Anyway, I'm diverting. So, all right, measure your starting point. Okay, measure your starting point. Measure your carbon footprint. For companies, it's important to measure your scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. Okay, what are all these scopes? Under the GHG protocol, they tell you what scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 is. Scope 1 is what carbon you emit from your own operations. Yeah, it's very easy to say how much electricity electricity is scope 2. All right. How much business travel do you take? Just like I did, right? So that's a scope 1. So basically, it's your own activities. Now, scope 2 is also pretty easy. How much electricity do you use? Why? Because some of your electricity, especially in Malaysia, is still coal-based. So there's a lot of carbon there. Of course, if you live in a place like UK, you have the choice of choosing a service provider that has renewable energy. And that goes towards, your carbon footprint. But scope 3 is where it is very challenging. Many companies find it very difficult to measure scope 3. And there are a lot of tools out there to help with scope 3. And I believe ALECA, Serge, you have to tell me whether I'm right or wrong. ALECA is one such company that has the tool to help with scope 3. Serge, would you like to say, did I get that right?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I didn't want to break in. You've got such a great talk. I think you've given us so much to think about. And yes, ALECA is building some carbon footprint calculators. We're working with companies to develop a way to calculate their carbon footprint. And we're trying to bring some fun to it. Like you say, I like to travel too. I admit I have the highest carbon footprint of all the team.
Bad.
I know. So I'm working on it. I actually, by doing it, even though it was a fun thing to do, it makes you think.
Yeah, it makes you think. Yeah, it makes you think very hard.
That's why I hope that everybody came to the talk today. I apologize that, we had some disruption, but you're here now, and I'd like you to just think about Tunku Alina's words. And remember, she speaks from a board level point of view. This is the way board members are thinking now. So please, we should be, even though we're not on board members, let's start thinking about that. Actually, I have a poll. I'm going to ask everyone.
Not yet, Serge. I haven't finished. Okay. Yeah.
Go for it.
Remember, I have 16 slides. This is 14. So I got two more to go. Okay. So right. So now you measured. Now what? Okay. Give me your roadmap. Tell me what you're going to do. Right? How are you going to keep track? So you must have your scorecard. And then last but very, very important, you have to disclose. Why you have to disclose? Because if you don't tell your stakeholders what you're doing, they have no idea where you're spending your money and they'll vote against you. Right? So if you disclose, you communicate with stakeholders, you say this in all your public documents, then your stakeholders will understand. Next slide. Okay, so that one was short term. Yeah. Now long term, you're talking going past 2030 into 2050. Corporate culture is very important. You have to inculcate sustainability into corporate culture. There's a lot of talking, a lot of convincing to do because different people have different levels of understanding this. And then as a company, organization, whatever it is, even as a university, there are the governance. Yeah, UITM, I must laud them. They are very good about this. Right? I don't know if there's anybody from UITM here, but I think they are very mindful about sustainability and climate. So even as universities, you have your governance put in the right committees, how you report upwards, and then stakeholder communication. Communicate. Over communication, I believe, is always better than under communication. And then your strategy. Yeah. When you decide on strategy, you have to embed sustainability into it. It's not a nice to have, remember, it's part of it. Because you're always linking ESG to value creation. And then finally, how are you going to incentivize your people? Yeah, how are you going to tie their KPI? How are you going to measure their performance and reward them? So that's a very, very important part. It's a lot of work, but this doesn't have to be done overnight. It just needs to be done in the long term. All right. Okay. So I think it's my last slide. Back to our question. Why is sustainability so important today? Number one, it is equitable. Okay, as human beings, we all know it's all about equity. But more than that, it also creates value. It also signals your resilience. And I think it also gives us all an understanding of this is a systemic issue. Yes, it's an issue that affects all of us, not just the company that you read about, not just the US of A. So to me, it's a way of thinking. It's a mindset, and it's progressive. today I may be telling you this, and yet tomorrow we might be having new research. So my suggestion is keep learning and keep reading. It's a dynamic subject matter and a wonderful subject matter. All right. So Asa, thank you very much. I'm going to hand over proceedings back to you.
All right, thank you, Tunku Alina. We have one question here from Praga. She's asking, in your opinion, Ms. Tunku Alina, is economic growth truly consistent with sustainability, continuous consumption, eventual loss of resource?
Yeah, I wanted to post this. Back to the donut that I was talking about. There was mana dia? Because this is very much the question that you asked me. Okay, I'll try to find it later. So basically,
You want to go back to the slide, donut?
no, it's not there. It's not
Oh,
there.
it's not here,
It's
sorry.
somewhere in the back of my mind.
Okay.
Why? Is there a trade-off? Is there a trade-off between ESG and economic growth? Yeah. The website that I wanted to share with you, which if after at the end of this stay on, I'm going to find it and I'll post it, will show you different countries. Yeah, different countries. So if you click on Bhutan, okay, you imagine Bhutan, so pristine, so beautiful. Everybody is living within that donut. Oh, cantik, sustainable like nobody's business. But we all know they are so poor, right?
Yeah.
So how? And then you click on the US of A, you click on UK. Oh, exceeded the ceilings. Red, danger, awas. But we all know that they are very they're very affluent society. Okay, I'm not going to tell you where Malaysia is. You all have a look. But yes, you are right. There are these considerations. How do we balance this? Okay, how do we balance it? I don't have an answer for you. But what I do know is that there are companies that have shown that they have been able to manage that balance very well, that they can deliver the value, but at the same time, they can also behave in a sustainable manner. So I don't know whether in the past, people have just been acting in a way that was not sustainable. Basically, they make lose and use mentality and therefore become very, very affluent and wealthy because of that. But sometimes you can actually reduce your levels and still be reasonably sustainable and reasonably advanced economically.
Yeah, agree. One more. On a scale of 1 to 10, where do you think Malaysia stands, Tunku Alina? Where is Malaysia in the SDG journey?
Oh, loaded question.
I think it's more personal opinion from your side.
To tell you the truth, if I looked at that donut compared to the rest of ASEAN, Malaysia has exceeded the donut here and there. Yeah. But having said that as well, in terms of our institutions, in terms of our prosperity, we are also doing very well by comparison. Everything is comparative to our neighbors. So, of course, I would like to say, can we do more? Yes. The answer is yes, we can do more. But to rank our country, I think it is very difficult to rank because on what basis can I rank?
Yep, I agree. So there's no way that we can rank our country in the SDG journey, right?
I think it is difficult because, like I said, 9 planetary ceilings, 12 social foundations with so many permutations. How do you rank? If you rank on certain basis, the US of A might be all the way down.
Exactly. Okay. So I think we are about to wrap up, but we have actually launched the polls, like Mr. Sech mentioned just now. There's the two polls to see what is your favorite SDG. So you can check out on the lower right logos with the triangle, the square, and the circle polls. So you can actually click on that icon and then you can pick your favorite SDG. Okay, so I think we could, let's take another one question here before we wrap up. There's a lot of questions for you, Ms. Alina. Okay. As a board member of several companies, how have you influenced or contributed to ESG with focus on the E, which is the environment?
Okay. How? Okay. All right. So, as a director, the first thing that you have to understand is the maturity level of the company. Some companies are at the beginning level. Some companies are very advanced. Okay. For the advanced companies, your job very easy. Okay. You just need to ask couple of questions. It will be picked up, and the management will run away with it very quickly. And then there are other companies whereby the understanding is still very nascent, just beginning. In those circumstances, it is a slowly approach. So, when you talk about the climate, okay, so you have to be very careful how you want to inject, because sometimes when you go too much, people will turn off, they'll stop listening to you. So you want your message to be heard. So you have to be able to ask the questions at the right time when you know people are open and listening. So as an example, I know we have 3 minutes to 3. Basically, let's pretend construction company, and we're bidding for tenders. Okay, all right. Tender A, sekian, it costs so much, complies with the customer's requirements. Tender B is cheaper, but we're going to use a lot more cement, a lot more steel. Yeah, it's cheaper. We will make more money there. Okay. So my question is, what is the carbon footprint of tender B, please? What is the carbon footprint of tender A? I won't ask more, because at that point in time, then they will realize, yes, it's cheaper, but where is my responsibility? So it's this sort of thing. So I hope that with such questions, I can contribute to at least the understanding surrounding the matter.
All right, I hope that answers your question, Mr. Leong. Okay, I think thank you very much, Tunku Alina. Again, we apologize for the earlier technical problem. We hope you guys, if you guys have any other questions, you can connect with Tunku Alina on LinkedIn. You can ask the questions here because we run out of the time. So it was really our pleasure to have you, Tunku Alina, on board. We really appreciate your time here. So everyone, this concludes our webinar. Thank you for attending, and we would also like to share on our side that relates to Tunku Alina's topic today, know more about ESG. So in ALECA, we actually provide a toolkit that is actually able to calculate your carbon footprint for your individual or even on the corporate side. So we do have the ready solutions for you guys to partner and collaborate with us. You can actually know more and contact any of our team. You can book a demo with us. We can show you how the system runs, and we could customize as well based on your business preferences, because everyone have different way on how they want to start in measuring the ESG metrics and all that. So ALECA does have the solution for you guys. Do give us your feedback where you can actually scan the QR code right now. And the number, you can just screenshot this slide. So,
Hi.
Sorry.
Hello.
Hello, yeah.
How are you?
Hi, Puan Razlina.
Cool mist.
Do you have any question?
We have a few backgrounds. I think you saw some yesterday.
Possibly unmuted.
Okay, so thank you, Tunku Alina. So before we wrap up this one, we would also like to invite anyone who would like to be our speaker for next series on ALECA Talks. If you guys are interested to share your thoughts, your experience, your knowledge as well, to become one of our speakers, you can just DM me and link me up on LinkedIn, and also my colleague, Banu Praga, Yasmin and Stephanie, and Mr. Sachin himself. And our next talk will be on July 8th by our Mr. Graham. Oh, sorry. So this is just a simplify on our side, ALECA, where our vision is actually to make a difference. So I think Charmaine, one of the participants earlier, I think she mentioned that her company is also already measuring the ESG. So if you are looking for another outsourced company to help you and supporting you in that sense, do hit us up. We could actually help to customize and work together in that way. So our next talk will be on 8th of July. We're going to have Mr. Graham on as a speaker. He's going to talk about is Bitcoin sustainable? Did the ends justify the means? So it's going to be the same time, same date. If we're going to update the link on our LinkedIn next week. So thank you, everyone. Let's before we close this session, I would like to take a picture from all of you guys, and we can end this session. Let me just stop presenting.